Hi everyone, my name's Mike Barcassi. I'm an application engineer with Bentley Systems. Today in our Tech Talk, we're going to start you on a road down a 4-part quick start series. So I'm excited about the content because we're going to be providing you PDF material with workshop instructions and also a data set to work through each lesson to get you comfortable with working with context capture, but specifically the photogrammetric reality meshes. So we're going to stay away from LiDAR, and we're going to take you through some 4 basic lessons in this series. So you see me sitting here outside. It's a bit windy out, so I have my papers weighted down with some camera equipment. And that's because when we talk about photogrammetric reality models, we're talking about models that are taken or using digital images, created using digital images taken from a camera such as this. So we also see a bunch of lenses because the most critical piece of any reality model, whether we use a drone, a fixed-wing aircraft, or we use our feet, is going to be the sensor and the lens, so the optics of the camera. So it's not how many wings our plane has or how many props our drone has or whatever. It's going to be the optics. And then of course there's accuracy that comes into it, both spatial accuracy and precision. We're going to learn a little bit about precision today as well in our first lesson. So I don't advise anybody to kill any more trees than you have to, but as you can see, the practice workbooks are available. They'll be made available to everybody watching this quick start today, and also they'll be placed online in the near future for people watching the recording. Now there's actually going to be a little more content in these guides than maybe you'll see me run through, and that's because of time. So you can go through these guides at your own pace, and any questions you can forward in our news groups and so forth and get the answers on. So today we're going to be working basically with just setup. I don't even want to say configuration, but just getting to know what or how context capture works, what parts of your computer are used by context capture, and in doing that you'll be prepared hardware-wise. Now we're not going to get into how to capture the images, but hopefully once you see the photo positions, what we call the exterior orientation of these images around our subject that you'll be working with, you'll get to understand how to capture these images. So a reality model is made of multiple images with overlap, and so maybe in a future lesson we'll look deeper into that. So again, sit back and enjoy today's presentation or today's Tech Talk, and I'm going to go inside and download the data and get started working through our first workshop. So I hope you'll stick with me. Thank you.
Hey everyone, while we're getting set up inside here, I would like waiting back inside, and before we get started with the workshop, I just want to reiterate our Quick Start series and mention the 4 workshops that are contained in it. So we're going to start today with the Quick Start overview and setup. So today, some skills taught in our Quick Start are going to be a basic review of context capture settings. We're going to look at the job queue setup in the preferences, also evaluate our graphics card, and give a little discussion on what's required with context capture equipment-wise or computer-wise. And then we're going to create a context capture project to create a photogrammetric reality model. So that's a model from photos. And last, we're going to open that model within a CAD platform. So we'll be using Context Capture Editor, but essentially it could be any MicroStation platform, Connect release, and you could do the same. Okay, so now let's have a look at the workshops. The way the Quick Start works is we'll have our practice workbook with instructions and a brief overview in the beginning. The overview in the beginning will include the software that will be required to work through the class or the workshop, and it will have a link to the data set. So we'll simply click on this link and download the data set, which I've already done. So in my case, I've created training folder on my C drive, and an exercise 1 folder has been extracted, and within that we see there are some images within the folder. So before we go any further, let's evaluate our computer that we're working off of. So we'll locate our context capture settings. We'll first make sure that it's licensed in some way, and then we'll go to our configuration. We'll see the job queue where it's pointed. In this case, we have a basic desktop setup with our job queue has been moved to the C drive. By default, I believe it appears in your documents folder. We'll start our benchmark, and while it's evaluating the graphics card, just a note, it's perfectly fine in your documents folder, the job queue. Here we see I scored, or my machine has scored a 162.2. It tells me the type of video card or graphics card that's in the machine, and essentially anything 100 or above is adequate for this work. We'll find some computers that will score above 200 based on the newest video cards and the highest powered video card. Also in our system information, you'll see your CPU. Speed of the CPU is more important than the number of cores, as some of the processes are single-threaded, so therefore the number of cores would not help you. The CPU is used mostly during arrow triangulation. The GPU here is used during the reconstruction and production, which is the longest part of the project. So you want to have a strong GPU, a fast CPU, and I get asked all the time how much memory. In this case, I'm working with 32 gigs of RAM. My recommendation is as much as you can afford, and the faster the memory, the better. So with that, I'm going to start a project. So we'll come into Context Capture Center Master. You'll see when we download and install the software, you'll see the settings, the master, Context Capture Engine, and Context Capture Viewer. These will all install with Context Capture. The additional software that we'll be using will be Context Capture Editor, and that is a separate download and install and can be licensed through your Context Capture license as well. So we're going to open up our master and create a very basic project. We're going to use the barn photos that we downloaded, and we're going to attach them or import them into Context Capture and generate a 3D model of that barn from the photos. So we'll begin by creating a new project. We'll give the project the name of barn. You see I'm using a network path here. That's not necessary if you're only running on one machine. If you use multiple computers with more than one engine at a time, you would need to use a network path. So in my case, again, I have the training folder, exercise 1, and I'll just select that folder. I'm going to create an empty block and say OK. So we'll see when Context Capture opens up on the far left, we'll see our project. barn, the options for that project, including the ability to associate the project to a project-wise connection client project. So if you've wondered what that licensing connection client's all about, we'll delve into that in future classes. We'll go to this is what's known as our project tree, and you'll see our Block 1 folder. At this time, the information about the Block 1 project is found on the General tab. There's also a Photo tab, a Point Cloud tab, Survey tab, and additional data. The very first step that we want to take is we want to get some photos into this project. Now we could click the Add Photo and navigate to our directory or make a selection from a folder on our drive. In this case, since we have our Windows Explorer opened up, we'll just highlight the photos and drag them in. So we're using 19 photos. And the thing with these photos, if we highlight what's known as our photo group, we'll see our sensor size and our focal length. And then, of course, there's the 35 millimeter equivalent, which, unless we're using a 35 millimeter sensor, will be different. When we highlight our image, the thing about the images, as I started to say, is that there's no position information with the images. So these were just taken from a digital camera with a 5.75 millimeter sensor and a 6 millimeter focal length. And in this case, we can still reconstruct this model. However, it will simply be placed in a Cartesian coordinate system, and it will not be to any given scale. We use pixel units as its scale. So if we want to add a scale to this, we would come back and add a scale constraint. So before we do that, let's run through arrow triangulation. So we've added our images. We're going to highlight our block. We'll go back to our General tab, and we'll click Submit Arrow Triangulation. In this case, we will process these using the engine that we installed. Optionally, you could process these in the cloud using Context Capture Cloud Services. We'll use the version that's on our desktop. And at this time, we have no position adjustment information. As I said, there were no XYZ information on the photos. We have no ground control, and we've not yet added a scale constraint. So we'll go to our settings, and we'll use all our default settings. So the top portion will be the settings that will help align these images. The bottom portion of the dialog are the settings that help to set the camera exterior orientation, and we'll click Submit. At this time, the arrow triangulation is processing. If your AT, arrow triangulation, is not processing, verify that your engine has been opened. Okay, so once completed, we can go to our 3D view and view the orientation of the images. This orientation is what's known as the camera's exterior orientation. If we go back to our General tab, we can now see that all 19 photos have been used in what we call the main component. So that means that all of the photos in this case have been used. If a photo was taken, say inadvertently, of your feet or something, it may not be used. In that case, it would show up here where 18 of 19 photos would have made it. We'll see the number of automatic tie points. These are points that join or are used to join the photos together, and help with the exterior orientation of the photo. Notice the resolution range is from 0.0082 units to 0.01 units. This is because there's no current scale to this photo set or no current position information with this photo set. So these units are based off pixel units. So the next thing we want to do is we want to add in a scale constraint. So we'll highlight our block 1AT and we'll select our survey tab. We're going to add a tie point and we'll name this tie point door top. We'll add a second tie point and we'll call this tie point door bottom. So with this, we can use the top of the door and the bottom of the door, and then by measuring the top or the side length of that door, we can then scale the barn based off that measurement. Obviously, it would be better to have a longer measurement if we were doing a larger building. But in this case, we're going to scale the barn based off the side length of the door. So the first thing we need to do is grab an image from the list below and locate, in this case I have door bottom highlighted. So we'll zoom in and we'll hold down Shift and data point. Then we'll select another photo, and alternately we can move the crosshair to the corner of the door, zoom in, move it again, and click accept. And we'll add a minimum of 3 photos. So you can either hold in Control and Shift, you can either hold in Shift and data point, or you can move the crosshair and accept the position. In this case, we have 3 images added to our door bottom. Now we'll go and we'll select another image. We'll select door top as the tie point, and we'll add a tie point to the top of the door. Tie points can also be used to help align imagery. So in areas where maybe the images don't have enough overlap, you could align or use tie points to help in aligning them. So in this case, we have 3 images used. Now it does not matter if we use the same images or if we don't use the same images. But you want to always try to use on tie points and control points, always try to use the clearest images possible. Next, we'll go to our constraint tab and we'll add a scale constraint. In this case, we'll say point A is going to be the top point and point B will be the bottom point, and we'll key in 6 feet. Change the value to feet, and now we'll accept it. So what we're saying is the distance from this point at the top door corner to this point at the door bottom corner is 6 feet. So based off that scale, the entire scene will be scaled. We can now go back to our arrow triangulation, and this time we'll right click and we'll submit arrow triangulation. So there are several ways to get to this menu, and that's the second way. This time when we go to our position and georeferencing section, we'll now see we should have final rigid registration and positioning constraints on user tie points toggled. We'll select next. We'll go to our settings. Again, the upper portion are the settings that will help align the imagery. The position and rotation will adjust just that, position and rotation of the imagery. And the lower section refines the optical parameters. and we'll submit this. Again, if your engine is not running, in this case mine is already open, be sure to locate your engine icon and open that. Okay, this time we're finished, and now when we look at the general tab, we again see 19 of 19 images are in our main component. This time we see 2,359 tie points, but this time we can see the resolution is now shown in meters, or in this case it's actually 24 millimeters to 29 millimeters resolution. When we go to our 3D view, it's going to look similar, except now when we go to measure, let's say a distance, we can select and see we're measuring 2.1 or just over 2 meters or just under 2 meters, depending exactly where we're connected to. So that would bear itself out since we're asking for 6 feet. Unfortunately, the measurement tool will always display in meters here in this view. So we can next go and create our reconstruction. So we'll highlight in our project tree, Barn 1, ATAT, and we'll go down to New 3D Reconstruction. We'll go to our Spatial Framework tab. And here, if need be, we can click the Edit Region of Interest toggle, and you see we can move the region of interest. In this case, the region of interest is pretty good. Maybe there's a fragment laying out here that we want to remove out or not, but we can move that as needed. In this case, with one tile, we're only using 4.9 gigs of RAM. This will be more than adequate. Regardless of how much RAM you have, you want to be wary of using too much. In other words, on this machine, I have 32 gigs of RAM, but I certainly would not want to produce a 32 or a tile that would use 32 gigs of RAM. So we'll submit our production, and we'll just call this production barn. And we'll create a 3D mesh. We'll create a 3MX 3D mesh. And we'll leave all our settings to default at this time. As we go through the series, we'll get deeper into these settings. For the extent, we'll just use the bounding box, and the destination we'll leave as the default destination, and we'll submit our production. So this will take maybe 5 to 10 minutes depending on your machine, maybe even more or maybe quicker. It's again solely going to be based on your computer specifications, and we'll come back and take a look. Okay, so our production is finished, and we can come into our production and click on the 3D view tab, and now we see our barn in the display. So again, within the measurements tool, we can come in and we can check the measurement of the barn. And again, just under 2 meters, which is what it should be if we're at 6 feet. And of course, we can make any other measurements. So the 3D view gives us an analysis tool. We can look at the 3D mesh, and we can make the cameras larger, smaller. We can even turn the texture off on the mesh. We see there's a little fragment here from the fence sticking out from our mesh. In a future lesson, we'll edit that fragment. So now what we want to do is we want to make this useful. So there are a lot of software out there, and it seems like there's more every day that work with photogrammetry and computer vision. Bentley Systems, we feel context capture makes a mesh that is exceptional in quality, and we are confident that we can put this up against virtually any other software, and you would say the same. So with that, let's look at what we can do with this mesh. So if we go back to the General tab, first off, you may have noticed the Context Viewer icon. So we could open Context Capture Viewer, or we could simply say open from Context Capture, and now we're in the viewer. At the back of the guides, the Quick Start Guide, there's an appendix, and there's a bunch of key-ins, so we can actually do some keyframe animation and moving around. There's other key-ins to view simultaneously a couple or two windows. So if we go and capture this barn in 5 years, we could view them side by side and take a look at what changed. And also things like clicking on the Control tab and getting a stereo view. So if we had stereo glasses, it would look like we were looking at it through a ViewMaster, and so forth. So there's some cool stuff, little tidbits in the back of the workshop guides that will pass out here today and will be available in the future as well, right through the Bentley Learn and Bentley Institute and so forth. So let's see, what else can we do with this model? Well, we can go into our Context Capture Editor and we can create a new file. What happens when we open Context Capture Editor, we're working in a DGN environment. So anyone familiar with OpenRoads Designer or MicroStation or OpenPlant or Bentley's architectural software will recognize this screen. We're not going to be using a work set at this time. Instead, what we're going to do is simply create a new file. So from this dialog, you will need to select your seed file. So we'll click Browse directly into your seed folder. And so in this case, what we want to do is we want to view 3D Imperial Design. So this is our seed file, and we'll navigate to our training folder, and we'll create a barn.dgn, and we'll save that. And now we can open that file. Here our Bentley Connect Advisor opens. This is where in the future, the near future, we'll see all these workshops listed along with the PDFs with the step-by-step guide. So anyone familiar with the MicroStation Connect release will recognize the interface. For those of you that aren't, you may want to hit the top drop-down, select your reality modeling workflow, go to your attach tools, to your reality mesh, and from here you'll click the attach command. So we'll go into our training folder, exercise 1. We'll find our barn project, and here is our production folder. So if we drill into the production folder, we'll come to our scene and we'll select the barn.3mx. Once selected, we can open that, and we'll leave toggled attach and apply coordinate system, even though there really was no coordinate system applied. Next, we'll locate the fit to view command, which is right up here on our bar. And we can close the other dialog. So some housekeeping things. First off, to rotate the barn, we can find our rotate command. In MicroStation or Context Capture Editor, in this case, we have 8 views. Currently, we have 3 views that are open. So we could have a isometric view, a right isometric view, and a top view. To turn off the grid, we just come into our view attribute and we turn off the grid. This is how we go about displaying our model. And let's just zoom in and verify the measurement of the door. So we'll go to Analyze, Measure Distance. And if I were to zoom all the way in, we're displaying in meters, but let's go, we picked an imperial file, so let's click on File, Settings, File, Design File, and you see we can change the working unit to feet. So perhaps I grabbed the wrong settings, so let's go back and click Measure again. Let's close it. And so we'll select the top and the bottom, and there we're at 5.998 feet, which probably if I would have taken a little more time to snap right on that very top corner, I could have gotten it right to 6. So this concludes our lesson.